8 real stories. 8 moments where the most dangerous thing was deciding to be polite. A back seat, a bedroom, a motel, a hostel, a hotel lobby at 3 in the morning, a night shift at 3:30, a window, a taxi going the wrong way. Pay attention to the last story, because it almost happened in complete silence. Story 1. The scariest Lyft ride I have ever given. This is my first post here. For context, I am a 29-year-old woman who presents as masculine for work-related purposes like rideshare driving. I use both major rideshare apps and generally have no problems. The riders are usually nice or quiet, and I enjoy giving rides. One day, I picked up a new ride request, about 45 minutes away, which is not unusual. The pickup location was near a Japanese grill and a dispensary. I parked and hit arrive. 2 minutes, nobody. 3 minutes, a woman walked up to my door. She did not immediately open it. She reached for the handle, then leaned completely forward against the rear passenger door and laughed, laughing into the paint. Then she bent all the way backwards until her legs were nearly on a 45-degree angle with her torso. She opened the door. My last rider had left something in the back seat. She stopped laughing and started snickering. I asked in my professional voice if she was the name on the account. In a creepily sweet sing-song voice she said yes, and mentioned the item left in my back seat. I asked to keep it up front with me to return later. She stared, not at me, but at the rearview mirror, and said, "Are you not going to call her?" We headed off toward her destination. Then she asked me to stop at a shipping store on the way. She never specified which one. As I opened maps to find the nearest one, she said, "Oh, you don't have to, but I have to get my friend out of jail. If I do not get this package, he will be there overnight." Then, she said, "He is in jail for killing." When I visibly tensed up, she smiled and said we did not have to stop. She kept staring at me in the rear view every time I glanced back. Then she turned to the empty seat beside her and started arguing with the air. She told the empty seat to stop it, that this was his car, that he was a nice man. I asked if everything was okay. She said, "Oh, my friend just thinks the car is nice." I told myself it was fine. People are unusual sometimes. But then she asked me if I thought it was okay to steal if you needed to. She turned and yelled at the trunk. She had a full argument between the seat next to her and the trunk area. Eventually she smirked and it was unsettling. I do not judge people for talking to themselves. Life is hard. But when the imaginary voices start suggesting that I might need to die, that is where I draw the line. She leaned forward and in a very soft voice said, "Are you not sleepy? Are you hungry? They say you are real sleepy. Do you like the boba drink? Let us stop. Maybe you could even pull over and nap for a bit." She bared her teeth at that last part. This was the 10th time she had tried to get me to stop the car. Then she said casually to the trunk, "Well, you killed her, so it is what it is." New information. She was talking to dead people. We got to a stop sign. She was sitting directly behind me. She leaned forward and extended one bony finger and poked me on the shoulder. She said, "How does your body feel, Mr. Rideshare Driver? Someone is going to die. He has 2 choices. He chooses." I asked who was going to die. She looked directly at me and snapped, "Nothing, no one." We finally got to her destination, and she got out. She said, "Thank you for being so patient. Make sure you do not forget to pause, eat." Then she came around to my window and smiled against the glass. I drove home and did not drive for a week. She spent 45 minutes in a car with someone talking to dead people about killing the driver. And the dead people kept saying, "Pull over." The next story happened while someone was asleep, and what was left behind is one of the most unsettling things in this entire video. Story 2. Stranger left me a note inside my bedroom. I used to live in a nice area of a major city. I rented on the ground floor of an old building shared with 5 other apartments. The building needed maintenance constantly. The owners were a family, and when repairs were needed, professionals eventually got called. At the time I was working a night job as a custodian, usually sleeping until close to 11 in the morning. My landlady had a habit of giving out my phone number to contractors who needed to be let into the building, which is illegal, but she did it anyway. She told me the night before that someone might contact me to get into the building, but no one ever called, so I figured they had gotten in on their own. I was woken up by the sound of workers hauling equipment down the narrow alleyway beside the building. I had plants stacked near my air conditioning cage on the window that opened to my bedroom from the alley. I scrambled down to make sure nothing got knocked over. I was in my pajamas when the roofers came back up the alley, carrying more equipment. A few of them stared. I apologized and quickly began handing plants through the cage bars and onto the ledge inside my bedroom window. In doing so, I had essentially pointed out to a group of strangers exactly which room was mine, which floor I was on, and that there was easy access through that alley. They worked through the day and left by nightfall. Nothing seemed wrong. 2 days later, I was woken early by a phone call from a local number. A man on the other end was slurring his words and asking for a name I did not recognize. I told him he had the wrong number and went back to sleep. Later I heard noise in the alley but did not think much of it. Then a loud bang and crash from the hallway woke me briefly. I fell back asleep. When I got up around 10:30 and went to the shared basement to do laundry, I noticed one of the wall lights in the hallway had been taken apart, the bulb removed, and there was broken glass on the floor. The basement light was also out. I went back to my room. When I looked over at my window, I saw something on the windowsill that had not been there before. A book with a note tucked inside. I do not remember the exact wording of the note, but it was signed with the word, phone. Was this left by the man he had called me that morning? My upstairs neighbor came down immediately when I told her. She had tried to do laundry that same morning. She went down the stairs and called out into the dark basement. A man with a deep slurring voice called back that he was just fixing the light. She sprinted back upstairs. We went down together later with flashlights. Someone had broken the bulb in the socket and brought down the vacuum in what appeared to be a failed attempt to clean it up. A trail of spilled laundry powder ran from the machines, up the stairs, and into the hallway. The landlady blamed us for leaving the side door unlocked, and refused to verify whether the number that called me belonged to anyone from the roofing company. I never found out who was in that basement. I never found out who left the note. But someone had walked into our building while I was asleep, gone to the basement, and somehow ended up at my ground floor bedroom window. A note left on a windowsill, signed only with the word, phone. The next story starts with a family argument on the 4th of July, and ends with a motel that burned to the ground. Story 3. I think my mom's instincts saved us, plus a disturbing update. This happened about 7 years ago. My family and I had traveled to another state for our first and last family reunion. It did not go well. The arguments hit a breaking point on the 4th of July after midnight, and my mom, fed up, decided to take me, I was 10 years old and sick at the time, to a hotel away from the drama. My sibling and dad stayed at the house. We did not have a car with us since we had flown in, so my grandparents let my mom use their car. We drove through dark, empty streets until we found a familiar chain motel on the side of the road. Since it was late and I was sick, my mom decided to stop there for the night. As we pulled into the circular drive, we saw movement in the shadows under some trees in the middle of the parking lot. A man in full camouflage, hat, pants, shirt, stepped out from the shadows, smoking a cigarette. As we got out of the car, he asked, "Do you all want a room?" We followed him into a small lobby. He went behind the desk and my mom requested a queen bed in a non-smoking room. He asked, "Are you two alone?" He handed us a physical key on a keychain, not a key card. Then he led us to our room on the first floor himself. He opened the door and the smell of cigarette smoke hit us immediately, despite us having specifically asked for a non-smoking room. He walked into the bathroom, turned on the light, opened the closet, showed us where everything was. The room was tiny, one bed, a thin closet, 2 nightstands. The tour was completely unnecessary. My mom stood outside the doorway with her arms crossed. I stepped inside, exhausted, ready to sleep. Then my mom said my name. Her tone had a dangerous edge to it, not angry, not scolding. A warning, the kind that meant something was very wrong. I rolled my eyes and went back to her. She grabbed me the moment I crossed the threshold and moved me behind her. She told the man we wanted a different room, truly non-smoking this time. As he rang us up at the lobby desk, he said, "You two are sure a far way from home." He held on to her credit card as she glanced at her phone. Then her phone rang. She answered. The conversation sounded like she was talking to my dad, asking about my sibling, saying she would meet them at the hotel down the road, saying "love you." My dad had no idea what was happening. She had been texting him under the counter while pretending to look at her phone. He called when he saw our message. She performed an entire conversation on the spot, in real time, while standing in front of the man who still had her credit card. As we walked to the car, she clasped my hand and said nothing. We got in, she backed out and drove away. And then she looked at me and said, "I lied." She explained everything as we drove. The man had opened our room personally, led us to a ground floor unit with a physical key he almost certainly had a spare of. Pointed out that we were alone. Made comments about how far from home we were. She had devised the fake phone call while walking back to the lobby, texted my dad to call her, and performed everything without showing a single sign of fear. We found a safer hotel further into town and stayed there for the rest of the trip. Now for the update that made my skin crawl. My sibling and I recently passed that same area during a family trip. On the road, we passed the charred remains of a building surrounded by caution tape and gates. My grandmother pointed it out and said, "That is the motel your mom and you stayed at." It had burned down in 2023. There's no news coverage of it that I have been able to find. I will never know what would have happened if we had stayed that night. A motel that burned down with no news coverage. And a mother who performed an entire fake phone call to get her sick child out, without showing a single sign of fear. The next one involves a rescue dog named June, and 3 men who did not expect what was on the other side of that door. Story 4. I think June saved me from a terrible fate. When I was around 20 years old, I subleased a friend's place for the summer. It was a 4-bedroom house in a college student neighborhood. The other roommates were out of town, so I was alone for the entire summer. Coincidentally, a friend needed someone to look after a rescue pit bull for the summer. I had always loved the breed and agreed to take her. Her name was June. I need to set the scene. I am obsessive about locking doors and setting alarms whenever I leave or am alone. This house had magnetic fob locks on both the front door facing the street and the back door facing an alley where I parked. I locked every door every time I used it. I also locked my bedroom door whenever I slept, with June inside the room with me. June had clearly been abused. She had scars all over her body. She was also absolutely enormous, muscular, powerful, intimidating. But we spent the first 3 nights bonding slowly. By night 3, she was letting me scratch her belly and acting like a puppy. On the morning after night 3, I woke up at around 6:30 in the morning, about 2.5 hours earlier than usual. I could not figure out why I was awake. Then I saw June. She was snarling at the bedroom door, body slamming it, sniffing the base of the door while growling, lunging over and over at the handle. I grabbed the shotgun I kept under my bed and racked it. It is a very old and very loud gun. The moment I racked it, everything outside the door went completely silent. I called out, "Who is there?" A voice said, "Maintenance. We are maintenance. We did not mean to scare you. We are here to fix the dishwasher." I said, "I did not put in a maintenance request. The dishwasher is in the kitchen on the first floor." The voice said, "We were told nobody was home. I am training a new person and thought I would show him what most of the houses look like inside." I cracked the door open just enough to see, and to let them see, the gun and June foaming at the mouth. There were 3 men, none of them wore uniforms. 2 looked like they were in their early 40s. The third was in his mid-20s. All 3 were dirty, like they had been sleeping outside. I told them to leave or I would open the door fully and let June out. I said I would call the front office to sort it out, but they needed to leave immediately. All 3 turned around and walked out of the house. After they left, I checked the doors. The back door, which I had locked the night before and would never forget to lock, was unlocked. I called the front office the moment it opened. They said they had not dispatched any maintenance workers that day and asked for descriptions of the men. I kept June the entire summer. She slept next to me every single night. In the weeks before this happened, at least 5 women had been attacked in that same housing complex. I will never stop believing she saved me from something I do not want to think about. 3 men with no uniforms got in through the back door while she was asleep. June stopped them from getting any further. The next story happened far from home, in a shared hostel room in Seoul, and the last morning is something she cannot forget. Story 5. Had a creepy hostel roommate, did not realize how bad it was until the last day. A few years ago, I was solo traveling in South Korea after finishing a semester abroad in Japan. I was 21. My friends had already flown home, so I decided to explore Seoul alone for a few days. I booked a hostel in a safe neighborhood with good reviews. But I made one big mistake. I booked a mixed dorm. I thought mixed meant a general variety of travelers. When I arrived, it was me sharing a room with 5 men. I told myself it was fine. Most hostel guests are easygoing. For the most part, that was true. I even went to dinner with 2 of the guys and they were great. But one of them gave me a bad feeling from the very beginning. Something about him felt wrong. I told myself I was being unfair and kept my distance while staying polite. The red flags kept stacking up. Every morning when I did my makeup at the vanity table, he would stand behind me and stare silently into the mirror. Not at himself, at me. Every time I asked if he needed something, he said no and kept watching until I got visibly uncomfortable. He kept asking when I was planning to shower, even though we had private stalls. He asked what I was doing each day and tried to get me to spend time with him constantly. Then one day I ran into him at a subway station completely across the city, far from the hostel. I had been visiting a palace. He was just there. I told myself it was a coincidence. On my last morning, I woke up early, drifted back to sleep, and then opened my eyes. He was sitting beside my bed, leaning over me, stroking my face and my shoulder. I sat up immediately. I asked what the hell he was doing. He mumbled something vague and meaningless. I got up, packed my things, and told him I was checking out. He followed me around the room trying to make conversation as if nothing had happened. I stopped being polite entirely and started snapping at him. Then he said, "I really like you." I told him that was not appropriate given that we had known each other for 5 days. He said, "Sometimes you just know." He kept pushing to meet again someday. He pushed for my phone number. I refused multiple times. He kept pushing until I gave him a fake one just to get him to stop, knowing I could block it immediately. Nothing technically happened, I suppose, but I felt sick and furious at myself for being polite for as long as I was. Though I also know that pushing back harder might have triggered something worse. He felt deeply unpredictable. That was the first and last time I ever stayed in a mixed dorm. She woke up, and he was already there, stroking her face. The next story starts with one of the oldest manipulation tactics there is, and it worked for nearly 2 hours. Story 6. Beware the sympathy trap. How a grieving son turned creepy fast. I am 21 years old and work night shifts in the hospitality industry, usually from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. I have seen a lot of strange things, but this particular encounter was one of the most frightening. I finished my tasks early and sat down in the main area to have a snack and scroll my phone. My coworker decided to take a nap, since it was about 3 in the morning and nobody was around. About 20 minutes passed before I heard movement near the bar area. I looked up and saw a man, maybe 40, standing at the bar counter. Not unusual, guests sometimes come down for water. I went back to my phone. He said, "Sorry, excuse me." I walked over. He was shaking slightly, soft-spoken, and he asked if he could have some water. Then he asked if it was okay to talk for a while. He said his mother was dying in hospital and he could not sleep. I agreed to stay. I should have made an excuse. I did not. He asked if I smoked. I said yes. He asked me to step outside with him. We talked about his mother. He talked about his life, being homeless once, moving in with his sister, rebuilding. It seemed like a normal, sad conversation. Then he asked, "Are there cameras out here? I would not want you getting in trouble for being out here." I did not register it as a red flag. I just told him I would not get in trouble for smoking outside. He seemed disappointed that I had not told him where the cameras were. The conversation kept getting stranger. Eventually something in my brain shifted, and I told him I was cold and heading inside. He said, "Come here, give me a hug, it will warm you up." I declined and went inside. He followed. He asked to sit with me for a few minutes. I agreed rather than risk getting on his bad side while alone. He asked if I had children, if I wanted children, if I had a boyfriend. I told him I had a fiancé, a lie. He said, "Do you love him? I mean, no harm in asking. You are so beautiful. Then, come sit next to me. I will not bite." I made up an excuse about getting the space ready for the morning. At that exact moment, my coworker woke up from his nap and walked through to get a coffee. The man, startled, stood up and said, "Tell your mom I was asking for her." Then he forced a hug and left to his room. He had pretended to be a family friend so my coworker would not be suspicious. I helped my coworker set up for the morning in complete silence, still processing what had happened. When my manager arrived and I was almost free to leave, the man appeared behind me out of nowhere and said he was going out for cigarettes. He asked to borrow my pen. I gave it to him. He returned 5 minutes later, gave the pen back, dropped a folded piece of cardboard behind my back where no one could see, and walked away. I picked it up. One line made my skin crawl. It said, "Wear tighter work pants for me next time. They would look good." I ran to the security office and watched him on the monitor. He was outside the building, pacing, waiting. He came back inside, looked around, did not find me, went back outside. Then he moved to the corner of the building and hid himself behind it, out of sight, and waited. My manager told me to exit through the back. I left shaking, checking behind me every few seconds, running faster with every sound. When I got home, it was a message from a number I did not recognize. "Hey, it is his name. Thanks for the chat. Talk soon." I have never blocked someone faster in my life. I did not return to work for about a month, until he was permanently banned from the building. I was with him for 2 full hours. He hid behind the corner of the building waiting for her to come out, and no one knows how he got her number. The next one started on a video game, and eventually showed up outside someone's window. Story 7. I had a crazy online stalker on a video game that turned into real-life stalking. I met this person through a mutual friend when I was around 18 to 19 years old. We would occasionally hang out in a group. Life moved on. I spent several years in a different city, getting help for a mental health condition I developed. When I came back, I started playing games online, and somehow ran into this person again. He started asking for my social media. I added him. That was the beginning of something I did not see coming. He would use gift cards to make in-game purchases and somehow could never figure out how a payment card worked. I helped him once, and suddenly it became a weekly thing for months. Every single time he got a new card, he would message me every 10 to 20 minutes throughout the night while I was trying to sleep. I finally blocked him. He found an old account of mine and messaged that one for 3 years, every 1 to 2 months. Eventually I had been clear of him for about a year. I would often play on my computer near a window. A new neighbor moved in next door. On her very first day there, she had a window peeper. The neighbors chased the person for a few blocks and lost him. About a week later, my apartment deadbolt broke in a very unusual way. Looking back, my best guess is that this person had been watching through my window for weeks without me noticing. When a new woman moved in next door, he shifted his attention to her window. It is the only explanation that makes sense. Then, a few years later, I ran into him again online. He had copied all of my in-game outfits and made his username almost identical to mine. People I had known for years were messaging me asking if his account was an alternate of mine. I avoid him completely, but I do not know if he is still out there. He copied every outfit, made his name almost identical, and most likely had been watching through the window for weeks without being noticed. The last story tonight is the shortest, but it almost happened in total silence, alone in a car, with nobody watching. This might not be the most dramatic story, but it is a reminder that you should never fully relax in a car with a stranger. Where I live, the taxi service uses a well-developed app. Both drivers and passengers have verified accounts. There is a rating system, and drivers face consequences for bad behavior. I had never had a serious problem before. One day I needed to travel from one small town to another, through a large city. Things felt off from the start. The car was showing strangely on the app map. When the driver finally arrived, we started moving. He had not pressed start on the trip in the app. He was also not shown as in waiting status. And the route he was taking was not the one I was familiar with. I had a passing thought. What would happen if he went the wrong way, not toward the city center, but toward the outskirts? And then he did exactly that. He had been completely silent since the start. He had not started the trip in the app, and he was heading in the opposite direction of my destination. There was no chance it was an accident. I am a 27-year-old woman, and I was alone in that car. I felt genuine fear. I asked calmly, "Excuse me, what route did you choose? This is not where I need to go." The moment I asked, he immediately corrected direction, pressed start on the trip in the app, and for the rest of the ride, he looked furious. He kept deviating slightly from the navigation suggestions throughout the rest of the trip. As we got close to my destination, I called a friend and told them out loud that I was almost there. I got out of the car shaking. If I had not known that route, or had not been paying attention to the map, I would not have known he was going the wrong way until it was too late. I filed a report with the app's support team immediately. 8 stories. A back seat with a woman talking to dead people who wanted the driver to pull over. 3 fake maintenance men inside a house before 7 in the morning. A mother performing a fake phone call in real time to get her sick child out of a motel. A man who copied everything, clothes, username, then showed up at a window. A night shift worker who was watched from a hidden corner for 2 hours. And a taxi heading the wrong direction in total silence. If any of these made your chest tighten, like this video because it helps more people find these stories. Subscribe right now because I post real stories like these every single day. Drop a comment below. Which story are you still thinking about? I read every single one. Stay aware. And I will see you in the next one.